having events online here on the Georgetown campus. So thank you very much for participating online, even though you're here with us in our great city. And we're very eager to be able to open up a dialogue with you and welcome. Let me first start by thanking those who've been involved in putting this event together. I want to thank, of course, the Washington EU Delegation Office, which has helped us to coordinate and plan this event. I want to thank our STIA colleagues, Science, Technology, and International Affairs colleagues who have been part of this. And of course, our BMW Center on German and European Studies, and Katrin Sieg, who's going to be introducing the commissioner. But I also want to pay special mention because I'm always excited when these events have a strong dimension of student engagement and student interest. And we have a very, very active SFS Energy Club. Pau is here representing that club. And I'm very excited that they've been able to partner with us in putting this together. This is part of a whole series of events here at the school. Given the critical importance, of course, of the overall issue of climate change and environmental issues, but really the kind of essential role that Europe will play in helping the world meet its targets on a whole range of issues. And the topic of Green Europe and the Green Deal has been really an important part of our effort to engage on these issues. We have lectures by prominent academics, historians, political scientists. We've had conversations with practitioners. I myself was happy to host an event with Rachel Kite, the former World Bank senior director on these issues, and also from the UN, and now head of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. This has been a topic of extraordinary interest to our students, of course. There has been incredible engagement on COP26. Many times we send our delegation of students to the COP meetings. This time we had a virtual delegation. But I'm so pleased that our school has been so deeply engaged in this issue of critical importance to the world, and recognizing the critical role that Europe has to play for this. So without further ado, I want to turn over to Professor Sieg to introduce Commissioner Sinkevičius, and warm welcome, and I'm excited to hear his remarks and the conversations and question and answers from our faculty and students. So over to you, Professor Sieg.
Thank you, Joel. And yes, I'm very pleased and very honored to introduce to you Virginijus Sinkevičius, who is the present Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries at the European Commission. Mr. Sinkevičius was Minister of the Economy from 2017 to 19, and before that, he led the Committee of Economy at the Parliament of Lithuania. Mr. Sinkevičius was elected to the Parliament in October 2016. Prior, he was a team lead for regulatory affairs at Invest Lithuania. He holds a BA in International Relations and Affairs from Aberystwyth University and a master's degree in European International Affairs from Maastricht University. Mr. Sinkevičius, before I hand it over to you, I also want to express my gratitude that you're speaking to us and to our students. We're greatly honored. And yes, we really wish that we could have had this event in person. We were really hoping to, but it's just this very strange one day kind of pivot back to campus. And I hope next time you're in DC, you will visit us in person. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone. And absolutely, I of course, I wish to have this discussion on the European Green Deal with you today somewhere in a big audience full of students, to see your reactions not on the screen, and to hear your questions not through the speaker. But of course, the health is most important, and I'm of course more than happy to have you here. And thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for everyone for tuning in. I'll begin. You know, I think people they like to say that Europeans and Americans that they are not the same, and they like to highlight our differences in our politics and in our social fabric, even in our cuisines, and maybe we do have differences around the edges, but I think at the heart we are interested in very similar things, and we share the same air, we share the same ocean. Very often we buy the same goods and actually even watch the same movies. But I think we also share something else, something much more important. We share our planet, and from today's meeting, I can certainly say that we share its future. So today I want to think about the kind of future we want and the best way to get there. In the European Union, we have a map, roadmap called the European Green Deal. And I think of it as a sustainable growth strategy, first of all, as the opportunities that really steers us towards that future. And after the last 2 years, many people feel that the crisis sort of have become the way of life, and we are emerging from the worst health crisis in our living memory. We are living through the largest downturn of anyone's life by considerable margin, and yet the most frightening thing is these aren't the only problems that we actually face. And after 2 years of COVID, most, of course, people just want to go back to the way things were before. And well, that's probably true, but that's not entirely the best idea. Now it might sound, optimistic, but I'm sure we will get COVID under control. But when we do, there will be still huge threats to face. A triple threat, steering climate change, biodiversity loss, and raising pollution, and taken together, what's most important, they threaten our life and our health, and they threaten our economy. In fact, they even threaten our existence. And the evidence is there wherever you look, from the melting ice on Greenland to the fires in the Amazons. The more fossil fuels we burn, the worse it gets. More heat waves and more droughts, more severe weather, stronger hurricanes arriving more often. And the worst, that there will be no vaccine for climate change, no social distancing from air pollution. You can't mask up to avoid the effects of biodiversity loss or our unsustainable use of resources. And our current economic systems are weak. They are vulnerable. The common conclusion is that we need build back better. For us in the European Commission, that means building, first of all, a system that's more sustainable, and it means more resilience towards the future shocks. So we are shooting for a green recovery underpinned by our European Green Deal, and it's certainly ambitious because it aims for a fundamental transition. Our thinking is that the only way to remain globally competitive in the longer term in economy where resources are constrained, and you can't deliver a fundamental transformation overnight. So the timeline seems to be long. The main goals are set for 2050, but it's actually so close when you look ahead. By that time, we want to ensure there are no net emissions of greenhouse gases, and that our natural capital is protected, and that economic growth is decoupled from resource use and pollution. But it's not just a deal for the long term, it's the backbone of our short-term plans as well. It's designed to achieve a recovery that is just, that's rapid and all-inclusive, leaving no one behind. And that's, of course, a massive challenge. Even so, it sounds maybe easy, but that's a massive challenge that nobody ever really done. And a lot of elements we need in the EU are already in place. As part of the deal, we now have a new climate law for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century, and a 55% reduction by the end of this decade, so by 2030. We have a new circular economy action plan, which I'll talk about in a moment, and we have a new biodiversity strategy for our nature, a farm to fork strategy for a sustainable food, and a zero pollution action plan covering air, water, and soil, and chemical strategy for sustainability. So that's quite a lot of new documents that we went ahead with in the past 2 years. And these instruments are good for the environment and climate, but they are designed to be much more than that. They will help bring about green and digital transitions to revitalize European economies and move us towards regenerative approach. So first of all, I mentioned circular economy, and I think this is a central element of any sustainable future. If we want to reach our climate targets, then we need a different sort of economy. And our circular economy action plan proposes a model to reduce the footprint of our consumption and double Europe's circular material use rate in the current decade. Simply put, the idea is to change the way we produce and, of course, consume. One focus is on the value chains that have the biggest impact, where we have the most to gain. Another is also preventing waste from happening in the first place. It's also a plan to boost recycling and to find ways to generate safe, high quality recycled materials, which we can keep inside the economy when waste can't be avoided. Now, the Green Deal is a new start, but it builds on powerful legislation that's also already in place. And that's the case for recycling municipal waste, for example, where a number of EU states are already at zero landfill, but some of these updates bring radical change. And just over a year ago, for example, we adopted a new regulatory framework for batteries. And it comes with mandatory requirements for any battery that gets placed on the EU market. And the way we see it, to develop a more sustainable and competitive battery industry, you need materials that responsibly sourced. You need some of the content to come from recycled materials. You need better performance and durability, and more collection and recycling. And that way, we modernize the sector. We make it ready for the huge expansion that is ahead. But certainly, it's not the only change. This circular approach needs to reach all corners of the economy. So it's also there in our approach to buildings renovation, where we need to avoid waste and become far more energy efficient. We need it in all sectors of industry, and that's why we have proposed a new chemical strategy for sustainability. That way we ensure that products are safe and sustainable by design, and on the back of that, we increase safety and trust in recycled materials and products, and that opens the way to more virtuous circles where materials stay in the economy for as long as possible. So that's a quick overview of what we have done so far on circular economy. There is a lot more coming soon. The next major deliverable is a sustainable product policy framework. At the heart of that is some new legislation we call the Sustainable Products Initiative. And the idea is to transform design. It's a plan to make a broad range of products more circular and resource efficient through minimum legal requirements. That way we lengthen the life of products, we make them easier to repair, we reduce their environmental impacts, and ultimately we cut down waste. But what's most important with all this legislation, of course, we want to keep innovation alive, and of course a large funding is put forward for innovation. We're also planning legislative initiatives to empower consumers and tackle false green claims. Consumers will be able to choose green products more easily, and they will be better protected against products that are not so green. those are broad brush initiatives. We also have more targeted strategies in the pipeline on sectors where the potential of circularity is particularly high. It's a way of using the principles of the sustainable product policy framework for specific value chains, changing the way we produce, use, and recycle. And these proposals, they will cover textiles, buildings, batteries that I mentioned, vehicles, electronics, ICT, plastics, packaging, and food. So basically, we tackle and trying to enhance circularity in sectors that we see that they really have a large footprint. And of course, the work continues to mainstream the circular economy in other EU policies, and the most important efforts here are happening for climate, as we support EU companies in the efforts to move towards business models that are more resource efficient. Of course, at the Commission, we are not naive. We know very well that EU can't transition to a circular economy in isolation. So supply chains, they are global, and what we need is, of course, a global transition. That's one of the reasons that I'm here, actually. The challenges are shared, and we need shared solutions to target climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So we are reaching out to partner countries around the world and looking for concrete actions that make our economic models more sustainable. That's also why, for example, together with the UNEP and UNIDO, we launched a global alliance on circular economy and resource efficiency last year. And that's why we are teaming up with countries around the world to build support for worldwide plastic agreement. The idea is to make plastic production worldwide more sustainable and combat, of course, marine litter in a way more effective manner. What's interesting, circular economy is extremely important, but it doesn't tell, of course, the whole story. There are two more essential elements in the European Green Deal we need to discuss. And the first one is biodiversity. You can sum this up very simply, no nature, no future. However you look at it, our nature is in dramatic decline. And in the last 4 decades, global wildlife populations have fallen by 60%. And the main reason to this is human activity. Almost 3/4 of the Earth's surface have been altered, squeezing nature into an even smaller corner of the planet. 1 million species are now at risk of extinction. And despite that, what we like to think, we depend on nature. Biodiversity and ecosystems are literally vital, and they pollinate our crops, they purify the air we breathe, they absorb vast quantities of carbon, keep our soils fertile, and much more besides. And we need these benefits in ways many people don't understand. And when we damage an ecosystem, it becomes more fragile. We compromise its ability to deal with extreme events, and then we make it easier for infectious diseases to spread. So I want to highlight that keeping nature healthy, of course, also boosts resilience. And there are so many reasons for protecting nature, but of course, there is always the economic one, which is, I think, very powerful, that almost half of global GDP, that's some $40 trillion, is actually linked to nature. And the 3 largest economic sectors, construction, agriculture, food and drink, are all highly dependent on nature. So biodiversity isn't just about faraway places. Our farmers, our fishermen and women, foresters, need healthy nature as well. They directly depend on it. It helps them provide with safe, sustainable, nutritious and affordable food, and it's their livelihood. For all these reasons, under the European Green Deal, we adopted a powerful new strategy for biodiversity, with conservation targets, a big role for industry, new legislation about restoring degraded nature, and an international vision for a stronger global deal. As you know, the world is waiting for the next UN Global Biodiversity Framework to be adopted at the much delayed 15th conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, so-called COP15. It should take place in Kunming, China, later on this year. And we are hoping, of course, it will be the Paris moment for nature, delivering an effective and ambitious framework for global biodiversity protection. And of course, most importantly, giving nature the high political profile that it really needs. And most importantly, I think, speaking about biodiversity, we managed to achieve a lot with climate change. Climate change become a buzzword, and if you ask a person on the street, he will know something. He will say something about climate change. Might be different opinion, but at least he knows something. And with biodiversity, we are way far beyond that. Even so that this decline of biodiversity is as equally important, and it's impossible to reach our climate goals without really restoring biodiversity, restoring ecosystem. So the last element of the EU Green Deal I want to mention is that pollution. It's of course clearly that it's bad for our health, but it's also very bad for the environment. It's the largest environmental cause of many diseases and premature deaths. Children, the elderly, and people with certain medical conditions are the worst affected, so the most vulnerable ones. It's also a major driver of biodiversity loss, and it reduces the ability of certain. So the case for stronger action is impossible to dismiss. And I mentioned already to you, we have the response under the Green Deal, and it's the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which comes with a very clear vision of a zero pollution Europe in 2050. By that date, we want to see air, water, and soil pollution reduced to levels that are no longer harmful to health and natural ecosystems, creating a toxic-free environment. The deal breaks that ambition down into a number of targets and goals that we want to reach, and that start in 2030. They're all designed to speed up the reduction of pollution, first of all, at source. In practice, that means targets like reducing the number of premature deaths caused by air pollution, improving water quality by reducing the release of waste, plastic litter, and addressing microplastics, reducing nutrient losses and pesticides use, and so on. So all the major sources of pollution. As before, we are not starting from a scratch, but we are looking at ways of raising the level of ambition and ensuring, of course, tangible and time-bound change. Because it's a question of time. It's I think a very good time for action, and most importantly, I think all this with a huge amount of public money being put on table. All of this, what I've mentioned to you, can be successfully funded by member states, and of course receive that attention that maybe was postponed due to other priorities. So I'm conscious that I don't have much time left, so I stop here. And what I've tried to give you is a very little snapshot of the European Green Deal and major initiatives that are underway or that are on the horizon. We know that most of these challenges are global, and that's why the European Green Deal has a strong international component. Basically, our strategy comes also with the international agenda, where we do an outreach where we try to speak at least about the same goals that we want to reach. Sometimes the ways to reach it, it's of course different depending on country specific. So we determined to work together with our partners coordinating those responses. With the United States, of course, developing its own vision on transition to a circular economy or resource efficient economy, how it's more called here. I'm sure that this will become a central focus of cooperation, and there is a lot of experience that we can share. And developing and implementing in environmental policy is, of course, a two-way process. And today has all been one way so far. Now I'm going to hand the floor to you. And of course, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sinkevičius. This is Paul Reeve from the SFS Energy Club, and I'll be moderating the Q&A. So first of all, let me welcome you from Georgetown University student body. I think just to add on what you said at first, right, about the Europeans and Americans, right, being similar but different. One thing I heard once, and that stuck with me, that I used ever since, is that we Europeans and Americans are part of the same family, right? We're siblings. We might not always see eye to eye, but family is not always see eye to eye. But we always work and cooperate together. And I think that's the essence of the spirit, the transatlantic spirit. But as you said, right, if we want to achieve our 2050 goals, we need to take action. And from this side of the Atlantic, I think it's fair to say that EU leadership has been truly appreciated, and the leadership that you've been having on everything you mentioned, from the chemical strategy to biodiversity, circular economy, zero pollution, fisheries, use soil, and so many others. You've certainly been busy. I can be for sure. But I'm sure that we're going to have a lively discussion on all of those topics. So let me open the floor for anyone that has any question for now that wants to jump in for the commissioner. Yes, please, Stefan, go ahead. I think you are muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you for coming here today, Commissioner Sinkevičius. I have a question for you regarding both circular economy and the sustainable product strategy. Will those two things be integrated into trade policy and external tariffs regarding the environmental impact of certain imports? And if so, how?
Commissioner, we cannot hear you.
I don't know if they hear us. Commissioner?
Oh, he seems to be speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it works. Good. Thank you very much. Yeah. I could hear the question very well. So the circular economy is not sort of a plan to be integrated into trade policy and sustainable product policy as well. The plan is, first of all, as regards the circular economy, is enhancing more circularity in the way we do things domestically, because it's also very important as regards EU's dependency on natural resources. So the aim is also to keep those resources as much as possible in our economy, so that we are less dependent on extraction of natural resources that are usually not in the EU. As regards the sustainable product policy, what's very important is that we want to actually put sustainability into production of products within the EU. So first of all, we're going to expand the Eco Design Directive, where we are going to, as you understand already, going to tackle the design stage, because usually the things that we use, they are already in design stage decided how long they're going to serve us, which parts will be weaker and which parts will be better. So for us, it's very important to tackle design stage. Then, of course, how they are produced, so emissions and etc. What impact it has on nature. Then thirdly, usage of it, so that they could be repairable, and so on. And last but not least, is of course what happens afterwards. So for us, it's very important that things could be remanufactured, refurbished. So of course we will be increasing the collection rates, and then use of certain materials, reuse of certain materials in producing new goods. How much that can be picked up around the globe, we'll see. I see the big interest, and many countries are of course very much interested, producers as well, because they see first of all through the lens of saving on resources. Of course, some of the processes that we're talking, they are technologically still difficult, but research is actually moving very fast. So I hope that you know, when we land our proposal on sustainable product policy, it will not only have, you know, sort of an impact on producers, but it will be also accompanied with a digital product passport, so that consumer also has the full information about the product. So basically, what materials that are used, what is the pressure on nature is done to produce, and then, for example, if it has repairable parts, are they available, and so on, how long the product can last, and etc. So this is all being developed, and this is one of the major initiatives of the circular economy. What's most important, that probably the natural question which comes, is how is business reacting to it, and are they happy with it or not? So I can reassure you that actually circular economy is very well received by business. Of course, when you go into details, it sometimes becomes more complicated, but overall, they see it as their possibility to have a competitive advantage in certain things. Of course, we always do a very extensive stakeholder consultations where we involve business representatives to have their position and so on. So, for example, on house appliances, I had a meeting with major CEOs who had different positions, but clearly you see that the scope for ambition is there. Same goes with textiles. I think the industry is ready to move forward and drastically decrease their footprint on nature.
Thank you, Commissioner. Iris, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I guess my question has to primarily do with biodiversity. You talked a little bit about the farm to fork strategy, but I also just kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about how the common agricultural policy is going to change over time to align sort of with the Green Deal's goals. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. A very good question, because biodiversity strategy, I think it's very ambitious, and I think when it comes to environmental part, we are really delivering. We're soon going to have a nature restoration legislation, which is very much awaited. But now, when it comes to common agricultural policy, I think it holds all the keys. Speaking about the success of implementation of the biodiversity strategy, so I think the big progress was done during the CAP negotiations. It's not there where I would like it to be honest, but now it will, a lot depends on, of course, each and every member state common agricultural policy strategic plans. They have now to submit it to Commission, and most of them already did, and services will be evaluating. So one of those services will be, of course, mine directorate DG Envy, which will be looking very carefully that ambition which is agreed on, for example, reduced use of fertilizers and so on is there, and that member states they keep in line with nature legislation such as our nature directives. So we'll see. Each and every member state still have to undergo test of how they're going to use this money. Of course, the criteria that we're using is do no harm principle. And I think it is a very important also achievement that we managed to agree, because at the end of the day, we tend to evaluate and count funds that we spent on different nature projects, on biodiversity projects. What's very important, as you mentioned, CAP, but also other funds that we would not go behind and actually fund the decline of biodiversity. So we'll be very carefully evaluating member states' plans, and we'll see what the ambition they have. But what clearly we have in our hands is the EU legislation, and we will be ensuring that it bridges the implementation gap, especially on nitrates and so on, and water quality and etc.
We truly hope that member state ambition is certainly high. Shelby, do you want to head?
Yes. Can you hear me? All right. Okay. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My question has to do with climate adaptation and equity and building resilience in communities in terms of this Green Deal. And we know that people and communities are facing the impacts of climate change in disproportionate ways. And while adopting green technologies, it's important to take into account like the cost benefit analysis of mining or extracting materials, putting plants near certain communities that might face and confront impacts differently. I'm just wondering if the Green Deal does take into account performing cost benefit analysis on locations of green technologies and industries and their impacts on the environment, as well as equity for communities that are facing these impacts disproportionately.
Yes. Thank you very much. Very good question. So in EU, it's very clear. So before you do any project, it doesn't matter. It's green, energy projects such as wind parks or solar. You have to do an impact assessment. And what's very important, that impact assessment also have to be in line with the Birds and Habitats Directive. So we have already multiple cases, for example, when offshore wind parks could not be developed, or the projects had to be changed because birds' migration routes are actually there, and of course we had to adjust. And it's not an easy discussion, because you're basically talking about two of your priorities, but you cannot lower your environmental standards even so that you're trying to reach a climate neutrality. You have to balance it. You have to do a very careful impact assessment. Second thing, which is also very important, is stakeholders consultations, and especially when the people live close to those projects. So of course there is always a dual stakeholder consultation which is done, and the impact on the community that the projects might have. And not always people are happy, even so that it's green projects. Not always people are happy, and some projects were stopped because of that reason. So I think in the EU we have quite high standards to that, and it's not easy to go around it. Even so that I get a lot of blame from companies that it takes them longer to develop certain projects, and we always look for less red tape, but also ensuring that our standards remain high. So yeah, this is the direction we are working. But I think very important that also always taking into account developing projects and so on, that the local communities would be included and would be properly consulted. And I see that a lot, especially if you look further outside the EU, for example, the indigenous peoples' rights are not really taken into account in developing projects, especially deforestation is something what bothers me a lot. And just recently I put forward a new legislation on deforestation and products associated with deforestation, that if proved that the products are associated actually with forest losses and then land use change to agricultural land, that they are not able to be sold on the EU market. So that's a little bit of an answer also to the first question about circularity being in trade policy. So this is exactly the nature protection together with the trade policy, which I hope going to be very, very efficient.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any other questions? Please jump in. Giving you a few seconds to think about it.
Okay, wonderful. Let me then thank you for questions and for tuning in, for listening in. As I said, let's take it as a warm-up. And let's have a live meeting at some point, because it was different planning. The last time I talked with my team, they said that we will have it in Georgetown and we'll still go outside and speak with the students and so on, because of course I enjoy this kind of meetings a lot. So I gave you a little overview of the things we do. So for the next time, you will know much more, I think, and we can have a proper discussion. And of course, I very much looking forward. I'm very happy to be back in BC. I lived here around 9 years ago, so I did spend some time here. So I'm happy to be back. Happy to see you connected. But I hope that the next time we meeting, maybe even without masks in auditorium.
I second that. Thank you so much, Commissioner. And thank you all for asking questions and for listening in. So I hope to see you next time in person. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Stay healthy.
Thank you.